3 distinct brands, 3 heritage bookshelf models, 3 almost identical asking prices, and 1 very busy company responsible for designing and manufacturing the lot. It's little wonder so many people are asking, what is the difference with these speakers? Well, there are many, but before we dive into them, let's provide you with a little overview of each. Super Denton is the 3rd iteration of Wharfedale's recent Denton revival, and arguably their best. The 80 and 85th anniversary edition Dentons that came before it were both conventional 2-way bookshelf designs in a heritage chassis. But what makes Super Denton so super is the introduction of a new and separate dome mid-range driver. Inspired by Wharfedale's acclaimed Evo 4 series, Super Denton sports a 50mm silk dome mid-range driver, serving up a whole new level of detail in that all-important midband. Additionally, there's a whole new crossover. There's upgrades to both high and low frequency drivers. The new cabinet construction enjoys Wharfedale's ongoing developments within the world of computer-aided intelligent spot bracing. And the introduction of magnetic grills is a brilliant little touch. But maybe what's most super of all is that Wharfedale have managed to pack all of Super Denton's additional goodness into a chassis that's barely larger than its predecessor. Denton 85 is 340 by 240 by 275, but Super Denton is only 360 by 246 by 275. Yes, Super Denton will serve up some heroic sound quality, but it's doing so within that svelte heritage bookshelf design we've all come to love about Denton. A short overview of this incredible new loudspeaker from Wharfedale reveals a 3-way vented box stand mount loudspeaker featuring a 6.5-inch or 165mm black woven Kevlar bass driver, a 2-inch 50mm soft dome mid-range driver, and a 1-inch or 25mm soft dome treble unit. Now the sensitivity is 87 dB with a recommended amplification range between 25 and 120 watt. There is a nominal impedance of 6 ohm, but it is 8 ohm compatible. Its frequency response ranges between 52 Hz and 20 kHz, with a bass extension down to a whopping 40 Hz. Its dimensions, as I mentioned earlier, were 360 by 246 by 275, with an additional 20mm for those speaker terminals at the end, and each speaker comes in at a whopping 9.2 kilograms apiece. Mission's 770 aesthetic might just be the most iconic in recent history. That big white front baffle, that big polypropylene driver, Mission's unmistakable logo right across the front. It's an absolute classic. And while the recent 770 and 700 releases were revamps of earlier 80s models, Mission's all-new 750 is an entirely new thing. They never made a 700 series bookshelf back in the day. But 770's popularity has inspired Mission engineers to craft a small 2-way bookshelf model that inhabits all the characteristics of its bigger siblings. There's that same iconic white baffle. There's that same mineral-loaded polypropylene mid-bass driver. There's the same unmissable and unmistakable logo of Mission right across the front. Only this time they have inverted the driver arrangement, and they've housed everything in a chassis that's ideal for smaller listening environments. Now, a quick overview of 750's specs reveals a 2-way vented box stand mount loudspeaker featuring a 5.25-inch or 135mm mineral-loaded polypropylene mid-bass driver, a 1.25 28mm soft dome treble unit, a sensitivity of 86 dB, a recommended amplification range between 25 and 100 watts, 6 ohm nominal impedance that's 8 ohm compatible, a frequency response between 48 Hz and 20 kHz with a bass extension down to 42 Hz. Dimensions are 35 by 216 by 270 with an additional 35mm for those speaker terminals at the end, and each speaker weighs in at 9 kilograms apiece. If you're unfamiliar with Leek's sandwich, don't sweat it, you're not buying a 12-inch sub. In fact, Leek's famous loudspeakers are far tastier than that. They originally derived their name from the sandwich together of multiple cone materials to create a membrane that was both incredibly light and incredibly stiff, a prerequisite for exceptional sound quality. It was a groundbreaking idea at the time, and it won Leake a slew of new fans. Re-engineered and reimagined, the modern Sandwich 150 bonds a stiff aluminum outer skin where the stressors are the greatest to a thick core of high-tech structural foam called polymethacrylamide, or PMI, a composite more often used in aerospace applications. Additionally, the new Leake Sandwich sports a whole range of modern upgrades, like newly designed motor systems with advanced material selections. There's a high-frequency driver with a damped rear chamber, entirely isolated from the rest of the cabinet. There's computer-aided crossover design, and the introduction of a sandwich cabinet construction, which is basically multiple timbers of different densities that are bonded together by a layer of damping glue and paired with computer-aided intelligent spot bracing to create dead silent cabinets. But Leake's modern Sandwich hasn't lost its roots. It's still sporting true walnut finishes, aluminum trims, and classic cloth grills, all in that traditional wide baffle, big box heritage loudspeaker design. Breaking down its specs, we reveal a two-way bass reflex bookshelf loudspeaker featuring a 6.5-inch or 170mm aluminum foam core mid-bass driver with a 1.2-inch or 30mm coated textile dome high-frequency driver. It has a sensitivity rating of 86.5 dB, a recommended amplification range between 25 and 150 watts per channel. It's 6 ohm nominal impedance that's 8 ohm compatible. There's a frequency response between 44 Hz and 26 kHz with a bass extension down to 38 Hz. Cabinet dimensions are 415 by 250 by 290 plus an additional 25 for those speaker terminals at the rear, and each speaker weighs in at a whopping 12.3 kilograms apiece. Running a comparison by numbers is somewhat of a foolish enterprise, but this is YouTube. Listening is an entirely subjective experience, and I'm no audio reviewer. So instead of dishing out my biased opinions, we're going to compare a few key considerations. We'll cross-examine these with a few specifications and what those numbers are likely to indicate, and hopefully by the end we've helped you gain a little clarity as to which of these three heritage speakers you're more likely to want to own. Now, those key considerations are cabinet volume and woofer size, driver configuration and material selections, sensitivity and recommended amplification range, and finally, fit and finish. Now, the most obvious difference between these bookies right off the bat are their cabinet dimensions. At 415 by 250 by 290, Leake Sandwich is the largest loudspeaker by a considerable margin. Combine this with its big 6.5-inch aluminum foam core mid-bass driver, and we begin to see why the Sandwich sports the deepest bass extension of the three at 38 Hz. Super Denton and 750 coming in at 40 and 42 Hz respectively. More often than not, the larger the cabinet volume, the larger the radiating surface area, the greater your loudspeaker's output. And when you combine that with a sizable mid-bass driver, you tend to get a lot of low-end support. Super Denton is also sporting a 6.5-inch bass driver. However, the difference here is that this driver is exclusively responsible for bass frequency, and I'll get to the importance of that in a little bit. But with this larger bass driver and the second largest cabinet dimensions at 360 by 246 by 275 millimeters, it's no surprise that this speaker reaches down to a whopping 40 Hz, which is actually a pretty incredible feat for a loudspeaker at this size. And at just 355 by 216 by 270, Mission 750 is the baby of the three. It's also sporting the smallest woofer at just 5.25 inches. So it won't command the room in quite the same way that Denton and Sandwich do, nor is it the deepest of the two when it comes to bass at just 42 Hz on paper. But 750 has other talents to sway many listeners, and I'll get to those in a little bit. So what all of this is really saying is that if greater low-end support is important to you, if your listening room is bordering on small to medium, and you're concerned that you need a touch more sound output and low-end heft, Leake's Sandwich 150 or Wharfedale Super Denton might just be your leading thoroughbreds. When it comes to driver configuration, these speakers are entirely different. The most obvious distinction here is Super Denton's three-way driver setup, offering an individual driver for high, mid, and low frequencies. It's also sporting Wharfedale's tried and tested woven Kevlar composite for its bass woofer, the Evo-inspired 50mm dome mid-range driver, and a 25mm soft dome treble unit. Now, three-way driver configurations like Super Denton are renowned for broader frequency coverage with more precise delineation between those frequencies. They're renowned for having a smoother transition between frequencies with better handling of mid-range complexities. There's also driver specialization, whereby individual drivers can be optimized for their specific frequency range. Think the 50mm dome mid-range inspired by Evo 4. Evo is acclaimed for its shockingly lifelike mid-range performance, that sense of vocalists and musicians being there in the room with you. There's also the added incentive of reduced distortion because each driver doesn't have to work so hard. There's better handling of complex passages, so when music or movies have a lot going on, think action sequences or complex orchestral pieces, three-way drivers tend to keep everything clear and precise rather than getting overworked and sort of muddling everything together. Three-way speakers can offer more dynamic range, providing a dramatic contrast between the softest and the loudest sounds in music, which tends to produce more engaging listening experiences. So there's a lot to like about Super Denton's three-way configuration. By contrast, Mission and Leak are giving you that more traditional two-way bookshelf configuration, but not entirely. Sandwich 150 is about as conventional a two-way as two-ways get, bearing in mind that it does have the largest drivers of the three with a 6.5-inch aluminum foam core woofer and a whopping 30mm coated textile dome tweeter. So there's a lot to like about the Leak, but it's Mission's deviation from the more traditional two-way setup that's most intriguing about the two. Mission inverts the traditional two-way speaker configuration by placing the tweeter below the mid-bass driver. They've been doing this for quite some time now. They call it IDG, or inverted driver geometry, and their reasoning behind this is that it's said to improve time alignment. Each frequency band, high, mid, and low, need to hit your ears at precisely the same time or things start to sound out of place. This is known as synchronization, and loudspeakers that do this best tend to sound much, much better. Now, the consequences of driver misalignment are things like phase issues, where misaligned driver timing can produce sound waves that are out of phase. This can lead to certain frequencies cancelling each other out or reinforcing one another inappropriately, resulting in skewed or unnatural sound. There's also soundstage and imaging compromises. Precise imaging and clear soundstage are crucial for a realistic listening experience, where each instrument and voice is distinctly placed in a perceivable three-dimensional space. Misalignment can smear this imaging, causing sounds to merge indistinctly or appear in incorrect locations. There's also coherency loss. Misalignment can cause the sound originating from different drivers, handling different frequency ranges, to become disjointed. This can make the audio feel less cohesive, as if different parts of the music were not working together harmoniously. But when everything works in sync, you get improved clarity and detail, cohesive and unified sound, enhanced soundstage and imaging effects, better dynamics, and most importantly, emotional engagement. The sum total of all of these benefits is emotional engagement. When everything's aligned, you feel more emotionally connected to each piece. You're moved by it. The loudspeakers tend to disappear into the background and you're left alone with the musicians. It's the very reason for stereo and high fidelity in the first place. It's why we mess around with all of this madness. So the idea that Mission 750 is focusing on this aspect of performance makes it a really compelling choice. And when you combine it with exceptional high frequency detail and air, again, the new 28mm soft dome treble unit is touted as eerily close to its bigger, badder, much more expensive made in the UK sibling Mission 770, the acclaimed Mission 770, the multi-award winning Mission 770. You get a distinctly different loudspeaker from the other two. So it doesn't have the room of presence or the low-end heft of Leak's Sandwich or Wharfedale's Super Denton, but it's going for something else entirely. The emotional connection of really precise timing combined with high frequency, detail, and air. And that combination, despite being a more subtle loudspeaker overall, at least in direct comparison with the other two, produces something pretty damn magical and something well worth exploring. Now, the recommended amplification range and the sensitivity of these three speakers are all comparable. There's barely anything between them, but there are some slight logical differences, and amp matching is important, so it's worth breaking down these differences to explain the whys of everything. No surprises here that Mission is the most sensitive at 86 dB. It's the smallest speaker, it has the smallest drivers, it's only running 2 drivers, so yeah, it's going to be the easiest to run, but it also has the most limited amplification range. All 3 speakers begin at the recommended 25 watts per channel, but Mission tops out at just 100 watts per channel. By contrast, Sandwich 150 is fractionally less sensitive at 86.5 dB, but it has the greatest amplification range at 150 watt per channel. And again, this makes complete sense. It's the biggest loudspeaker by a hefty margin. It sports the largest drivers, both woofer and tweeter, so yeah, it's gonna handle more juice. And Wharfedale Super Denton, the least sensitive of the 3 at 87 dB, is less sensitive for a reason. It's running more drivers. Yes, the additional driver increases the power demands on your amplifier, though as we can see, only slightly. But by increasing the number of drivers, we can also see that Super Denton, despite its smaller size, also increases its amplification range, sporting a healthy 120 watts per channel. Now, all of these recommendations, they're recommended, not fixed ranges. They're guides. These speakers will run at lower wattage, though nowhere near at their best, and they will run at higher wattage, but you should certainly do so with caution. The point here is to get a gauge of where you're at or where you're looking to go in the future. If your intention is to eventually run separate pre and power amps and really increase your amplification power, suddenly the Sandwich becomes a more attractive option. But conversely, if you're running modest amplification and intending on keeping it that way, a more sensitive option like Mission 750 might be your best bang for buck. Each of these speakers enjoy the luxury of magnetic grills, thank God. However, the irony of these designs is that the loudest aesthetic of the 3, Mission's bold and beautiful white front baffle, is the only speaker of the 3 designed to be played grills on or off. The grills on both Denton and Sandwich are inset and uniquely sculpted to support audio performance. They're designed to be played grills on. So if you're a driver's out sort of listener, bear in mind that there's a very slight, very subtle degradation to your sound quality when listening with the grills off. The protruding baffle edges of Super Denton and Leek's Sandwich are gonna cause some diffraction. Now, it's easy to see why this design choice was made. The 45-degree baffle edges with the inset grills reduce the speaker's profile, giving both of these heritage designs a slightly minimal and modern touch, which looks fantastic. It really works for a modern reimagining of these classic designs, but it does come at a cost. For Super Denton, it's probably not a problem. The black baffle and driver combination really isn't all that aesthetically wowing, but it's a real letdown with the Leek because the timber baffles contrasted with the aluminum sandwich cone and the mounting plate around the tweeter, it's beautiful. These are gorgeous design choices that really deserve their moment in the sun, and living with these speakers, I'd happily flip between the grills on or off. Only if I do, I know the sound quality is not going to be as good. Now, to be clear, the difference in sound quality is super subtle. The average punter probably isn't going to notice, and I definitely put myself into that category. It honestly didn't bother me in the slightest, but it does bear mentioning, so keep it in mind. If you want your woofers to shine, go the Mission 750, or you're going to have to stomach knowing that there's a slight degradation to your audio performance from one of the other 2. The fit and finish of all 3 speakers is beautiful. It's above and beyond the asking price, and they each have their own endearing features. Those jersey neck grills from Wharfedale's Heritage series are still a big favorite of mine. They're truly classic, and their inset finish, to me anyway, is a touch of design brilliance. It's a little modern tweak for a very classic loudspeaker. The way the aluminum trims and driver features from Sandwich 150 contrast its walnut veneer, especially on that baffle, I absolutely love. And in fact, the walnut baffle itself really reminds me of something that's a lot more prestige, something like Wharfedale's UK-made Dovedale, and that's a speaker that's 5 times worth the asking price of Leek's Sandwich. And Mission, what can I say about Mission? I adore the 700 series aesthetic. I really do think it's one of the most iconic speaker looks of the last half century, and it's probably my personal fave of the 3. The big white baffle, the big white polypropylene driver, the loud and proud Mission logo across the front, that stuff just gets me. It's beautiful. As for finishes, Leek Sandwich 150 only comes in the walnut that you see in this video. There are no other finishes at this stage. Mission 750 is offered up with both the walnut you see here and a black oak version. Super Denton, however, gives you walnut, black oak, and a more traditional mahogany finish. So if you're trying to get away from walnut, Super Denton and Mission are your options. I hope at the end of all of this, one thing is clear. That choosing between these loudspeaker models is about trade-offs. If you want bigger room presence and that low-end authority, Leek will likely get you there, but better handling of complex musical arrangements is going to put Super Denton ahead of the Leek. And what if you want to play speaker grills off? Well, now you're pointing towards Mission 750, or you're suffering the consequences of a slight depreciation in your sound quality because of those protruding baffle edges. And what if you like the idea of improved time alignment and high frequency air and detail? What if that appeals to your listening choices, but you're also kind of inclined to want to run more amp power down the line? Well, Mission 750 becomes a bit of a conundrum and you've got some decisions to make. Again, this is all going to be about trade-offs. But what also should be clear at this stage is that despite all of these speakers being heritage models and being similar in price and all made from the same parent company, International Audio Group, there are significant differences between these speakers that cater to differing listening preferences. And our advice is to combine what you've learned here with what the reviewer is saying about sound quality before making your purchase decisions. And if you're still undecided at that stage, call into your local dealer, because by far the best way to know what works best for you is to hear it for yourself in the flesh, listening to the music that you like best. Well, that's it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this feature breakdown of these three incredible heritage models from IAG. For more information on any one of these speakers, please head on over to www.avrevolution.com.au. My name's Matt. It was a pleasure to be here. I'll see you guys again next time. If you want bigger room presence and low-end authority, Leek will likely get you there, but there's always a plane flying right above this house. I'm gonna rent a house in the country in the middle of nowhere, and that's where I'm gonna do all my videos from.